I took them very legally, and I wasn't hiding them. We had boxes on the front of and a lot of those boxes had clothing, and we're moving out, okay? Unfortunately, we're moving out of the White House. And because we're moving out of the White House, our country's going to hell. But we weren't hiding anything.
He just said it. Trump said it right there. I stole the documents and left them lying around everywhere, like red beer cups in a frat house. Except these cups contain information as to our intelligence assets, plans for the Middle East, troop movements, and yes, Russia and NATO. And that became even more relevant when it was revealed that Trump had parties at Mar-a-Lago with Saudis, Eastern European leaders, and yes, the occasional Russian, with these documents laying everywhere, even in the bathroom, where our enemies could read our secrets while taking a dump.
What Trump is arguing is, as you say, absolutely preposterous. I mean, he's arguing, first of all, that the records belong to him under the Presidential Records Act. Literally, the Presidential Records Act starts by saying precisely the opposite, that official papers of the president belong to the United States of America, and the president can have certain rights to look at those papers after the fact, but they have to go through the National Archives. And none of that, has anything to do even with the classification. The classification issue is something that doesn't affect the fact that he took these documents and then squirreled them around. But and there's no argument that this is somehow unconstitutionally vague. I mean, he obstructed justice. There's just no question about that. People go to jail for that all the time, and there's no question that these materials contain national defense information. Even if he could pull the Karnak the Magnificent routine with an envelope to his head and say these are declassified, they'd still be national defense information under the Espionage Act, and each of those counts subjects him to a potential of 10 years in jail, and there are just dozens of counts. It's an open and shut case with all the witnesses against him telling the prosecutors and the grand jury about how he hid the documents and lied about the documents, had his lawyers lie about the documents, tried to destroy the evidence, and so on and so forth, as you've mentioned. I mean, that's just devastating evidence.
Despite Trump's indefatigable need to lie and obfuscate, in this interview with NewsMax, he admits to crimes while further revealing the depths of his insanity. He can't even finish a thought. And when he does, you can see there was a part of his brain that was trying to protect him, to stop him, but fails.
Did you learn some negative lessons by being right when they were wrong? And you might think, well, I'm always right. They must always be wrong.
Well, they do have a hat on, and I don't produce it. Somebody else. Trump was right about everything. I mean, if you...
They were wearing hats? Who the would say that? Can you imagine Biden, Obama, or Bush, or Clinton, when asked about policy, saying, well, they're wearing hats that said I did great?
I want to be a dictator.
Trump admits to crimes, but then says they weren't crimes. Or, look what Hillary and Joe did. Or, so what if they were crimes? America needs a leader. Trump even called for tearing up the Constitution.
And then on Saturday, seemingly out of nowhere, called for the suspension of the Constitution as yet another attempt to overturn the 2020 election.
Donnie Sniffles is in big trouble. Even if Judge Cannon, who is kneeling before Tiny Fingers for a prize in her Cracker Jack box, gives Trump some relief, the circuit court will most assuredly smack them both down. Trump committed serious crimes and admits he did it.
Hillary Clinton.
Here's another Trump classic. It's the "What about Hillary" whine.
By the way, they released Hillary Clinton. She hammered her phones. She used all sorts of acid testing and everything else. They call it bleach bit, but it's essentially acid that will destroy everything, within 10 miles. I mean, what she did was unbelievable. Nothing happens to her. Nothing happens to Bill Clinton. He took it out in his socks. It was the famous socks case, which he actually ended up winning. Russia, please.
As crazy as this guy is, his followers actually believe this can happen, that somehow emails or maybe hard drives can have bleach poured over them to destroy them. They really believe Hillary Clinton did this. They've latched on to one of the most insane claims made by Trump ever. And despite the insane notion of pouring acid into your computer to get rid of emails, Trump presented this idea of destroying emails with acid or bleach as not only possible, but a matter of fact.
And before I ever started, I was under investigation. I don't mean this, I'm talking about before I even announced I was running for president. I was under investigation by these lunatics. And they were investigating me.
So why was Trump being investigated? Because Trump has always been bad with money. In an interview with a sports writer 10 years ago, Eric Trump, who inherited his father's brilliant mind, was asked where Trump was getting his money for his businesses after the Great Recession.
Here's how Dodson remembers the conversation.
I said to Eric, well, you're the head of his golf services.
development company. Who's funding all this? I think I said, so who is it, the Israelis or the Chinese? Because they are the ones that were really spending money. I remember very clearly what he said. He said, no, we don't need American banks. We have all the funding we need out of Russia.
Look, every intelligence agency in the U.S. backs what I'm about to tell you, that Trump, with the assistance of Putin and the Internet Russian agency, used Facebook as a psyops for confusing voters and then hacked the DNC servers and gave the info to WikiLeaks. We knew the evidence showed Russia assisted in his electoral victory, so Trump did the, well, what about Hillary's emails game? And 8 years later, it's still the same shit, only crazier.
Russia, 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 Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine.
But this interview is just getting started. NewsMax, which along with OAN is the minor leagues of crazy white people fertilizing America with their Trumpy bullshit, allowed Trump to alternately admit guilt while putting on a display of his mental decline.
The Hunter Biden stuff is bad, let's face it. And if you believe the laptop from hell, there's a lot of money that's been exchanged, and it's a lot of money and seems like a lot of proof. They're going to find out, and they certainly have found out, because, look, a lot of money has been exchanged, and from a lot of different countries, including China, and that's serious stuff. But I would just say to him, what do you say?
Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, maybe you've been paying attention. The Justice Department just arrested Alexander Smirnov, an FBI informant whose lies were the basis of Comer and Jordan's pathetic little stiffies during the Biden impeachment inquiry. Smirnov not only lied about Hunter and his father taking any money from anyone, but the lies were fed to Smirnov from Russian intelligence. And there seems to be evidence that Comer and Jordan knew the source of that info, which would be a crime. But still, Newsmax, Fox, OAN, they let Trump peddle this
Viktor Orban, a couple of news items, if you don't mind. Viktor Orban said that you told him that you want to cut funding for Ukraine as soon as you get there. Where's that effect? He said that in an interview.
Yeah.
Is he correct? Is that the plan?
Well, first of all, he's a fantastic guy. And
by the way, Orban is friends with Turkey's President Erdogan, who has a long history of human rights abuses, suppression of dissent, and suppression of freedom of speech. So you can see why they're friends.
so he's a fantastic guy.
Trump's long criticism of NATO not paying their fair share seems ominous as Putin becomes even more aggressive, just this week threatening the U.S. with nukes again.
Gets up and makes a speech the other day. He's screaming at everybody like a lunatic. And everybody said, oh, he made it. You know, he made it through, barely. He made it through the speech, and he was all jacked up. And you just wonder what's going on. This is a very dangerous time for our country.
And after months of right-wing media and Trump calling Biden feeble, Biden hammered his critics at the State of the Union with a performance that has Fox and Tiny Fingers saying he was on drugs.
Are you ever lonely?
Are you lonely? Now, that's a hard-hitting interview. But he went on to ask him about taxes.
All the different things we did, lowest taxes ever. We got the biggest tax cuts ever, or the biggest regulation cuts ever.
Which is bullshit. Trump lowered the tax rate for corporations from 35% to 21%, but nothing for the middle class. The world, according to Trump, revolves around a sociopath whose favorite president reveals the depths of his perverse nature.
Years I love history, I study history. And I was always told that Andrew Jackson, as a president, was treated the absolute worst. He was just really lambasted.
Andrew Jackson, soon to be replaced on the $20 bill by abolitionist Harry Tubman, forced the bloody transfer of hundreds of thousands of Native Americans from the South. But Jackson is even worse than his brutal record with regard to Native Americans. Indian removal was not just a crime against humanity, it was a crime against humanity intended to abet another crime against humanity. By clearing the Cherokees from the American South, Jackson wanted to open up more land for cultivation by slave plantations. He owned hundreds of slaves, and in 1835 worked with the Postmaster General to censor anti-slavery mailing from northern abolitionists. That's Trump's hero, and this is yet another interview that not only reveals who Trump is, but he's eager to admit it. He's proud of these horrible things.
Impeachment hoax number one, impeachment hoax number two, all hoaxes and scams.
To paraphrase Maya Angelou, if they tell you who they are, fucking believe them.
Am I wrong? Damn right.
Yes!
Tick-tock.
You're in a lot of trouble, Donnie.
Follow, like, and hit notifications as Really American keeps you up to date on the latest Republican cult lie in this very important year. For Really American, I'm Chip Franklin.